Hey yo, salute to all my subscribers and a special shout out to everybody else passing through. YouTube, what's good? All right, so about a week ago, um, I introduced a new playlist that I was going to be adding to this channel. We talked about the roundtable discussions that we do on this channel weekly. Actually, let me get rid of these. I talked about the roundtable discussions that happen weekly on this platform. And I talked about how some of the things and the issues that we argue on our roundtable discussions sometimes have a tendency to get a little tense. And when that happens, um, there's time, but there's very limited time for the 5 people on the panel to argue their points. And I talked about how sometimes some of the points that I have a tendency to argue can be met with certain pushback from the rest of the panel. Rightfully so, because I'm very argumentative, and some of my views, while I don't think they're radical at their core, based on the principles of what I'm arguing, but I think my approach and to what extent I'm willing to argue certain things, I think that meets with a lot of pushback. So on one of our last roundtable discussions, we talked about fathers' rights as it pertains to abortion. Not that fathers should have a right to say that their child should be aborted, but what happens when a father wants their child to live and the mother wants to abort that child? And we went into that for about a half an hour. We went back and forth. And the general consensus from the rest of the members on the panel was that, you can't tell a woman what to do with her body, and women's rights supersedes all. And I had a big issue with that on a very foundational and basic level. First, my argument is, and still continues to be, that as the father of my unborn child, I have contributed 50% of what is required for that child to have life. Without sperm to fertilize an egg is useless. Without my chromosomes, without my DNA that goes into half of the creation and production of a child's life, a womb is useless. And my other argument is this, and it has always and will always be this: the same rights that are afforded to one person or a group or a race, be it gender or what have you, should always be afforded to every group or race or gender or what have you. And it's interesting because after the panel was done arguing me down, not right after, but about a couple weeks after, there were some developments that were made in the criminal justice system, the legal system. Interesting because a lot of what I read in the article that I'm about to reference are some of the exact arguments that I had no idea that this case was even going on. I'm not even going to say it was a case. There was a Supreme Court justice out of the state of Alabama who decided to write to the United States Supreme Court because of some decisions that were made pertaining to a murder case that this justice felt were connected to the original decision that led to the right to abortion to even be a thing. That was the Roe v. Wade decision back in 1973, for those of you who don't know and have not done the research. This was also one of the things that I argued during the roundtable. A lot of the things that we talk about when we talk about rights, when we talk about certain decisions that changed rights for a lot of groups, are very recent in this country's history. 1973 was only 45, 46 years ago. So it's only been for the past 45 years that abortion has been a legal thing to do in this country, stemming from this Roe v. Wade decision. I wish my fucking phone would stop going off. I don't put my phone on silent. I don't put my phone on vibrate. Stop fucking texting me. The argument is, so, I started thinking, when I did the math and saw how far back abortion goes, I started thinking, somebody who was 50, exactly 50 years old, back in 1973, when the Roe v. Wade decision came down, which again, for those of you who aren't familiar, you can go research it. That was a decision that basically created the right to abortion. Somebody who was exactly 50 at that time could still be alive today, 45, 46 years later. Probably not, but there's a chance that they could be, because it's not even 50 years ago. It's not even 50 years ago. And, aside from that, this case that was being referenced, once I really get into it, makes a lot of good points, a lot of points that I made during the roundtable discussion. But ultimately what it came down to was, if people aren't willing to accept what's logical, and if people aren't willing to accept what makes all the sense in the world because of emotion, or because certain people are just pigeonholed to what their ideals are, and that's fine. There's no issue. There's not necessarily an issue in principle there, because you should hold steadfast to what your views are. But I think part of the reason why people will always have an issue and always have a hard time arguing points with me is because if you don't know what exactly it is I'm arguing, which is always logic, which is always principle, and then your argument is emotional, you're going to be hard pressed to get a leg up against me in that argument. I mean, that's been the case with me for a very long time now. So what sparked me to want to do an afterthoughts or a roundtable epilogue on that specific roundtable discussion? And for those of you who may have not seen that roundtable discussion, there is a playlist on this YouTube channel titled Roundtable Discussions. And every single roundtable that we have done so far, which we do every week, every Tuesday night at around 7 o'clock, we do it as a live stream. But every single one that we have done to date is in that playlist on this channel. So go check it out. And it was probably not this most recent one, but the one before it. So, State Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, patently illogical. Shocking decision declares unborn baby is a person, which was my argument during the roundtable discussion. And this is an article that was published 3 days ago, referencing Justice Tom Parker, who wrote to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm going to read some of the excerpts from this article as they reference some of the quotes in his address to the U.S. Supreme Court. Again, stemming from a case out of Alabama, where an individual was charged with the murder of his wife and unborn child. Now, and this is another one of the things that I was cautious of, and that I expressed being cautious of in that roundtable discussion when we're talking about these things, because when you're arguing something and why something should be or shouldn't be, usually you have to reference other things that either are or aren't, or should not be, and why. And it's continued to be my position that, in order to argue why something makes sense, you also have to be careful that other things that are connected to that thing aren't going to be negatively affected if that thing should change. Because, a good law should be able to stand alone. And if it's for protection of a group, if it's for protection of a gender, if it's for protection of whatever it's a protection of, then to put that law into question or to put that protection into question, you should not have to compare it against something else that it conflicts with, because the law can usually put in things that will rectify those loopholes, so to speak. But as it pertains to this argument here that we're about to get into, there's no way to do that, it seems. So why are we here? I feel that abortion should be illegal outside of few exceptions: rape and any medical dangers that could be posed to the mother if that pregnancy was continued. I have already made that argument. I have already pointed out those exceptions, so I will not do that again. So anyone who comments, anyone who says, well, what about rape? I will ignore it, because I will say it one last time. Anything that I'm about to argue, anything that I have argued pertaining to abortion, the fact that I don't believe that it should be a legal thing to do, is barring rape and is barring any medical condition or potential dangers that could cause the mother to be in danger. And I'm not going to touch on that again, because it seems like every time someone has an argument, there is someone somewhere who says, what about rape? What about this? What about that? So I'm covering that one last time, and then I'll be done with it. So the Alabama Supreme Court has ruled that an unborn baby is a person under the law, and consequently, the death of that person can be punished with execution. Alabama is a state that believes in the death penalty. And Alabama is a state in which the death penalty is legal. And Alabama feels that if you take someone's life, your life should be taken. I don't agree with the death penalty, but I agree with the principal fact that if you take a life, your life should be taken. Why? Not because I want to see someone's life be taken, but I think this is the premise for states that have initiated the death penalty. It's very simple. The most basic right under the law, any law of nature, law of the universe, law of any civilization, is the right to life. That's the most basic law. Before you can have a right to do anything or fight for anything, you have to have the right to life. And for some reason, when I argued this on the panel, it didn't seem to really hit home for people. I can't speak to what people's thoughts were, but it seemed like I was met with some resistance when I said that, which is crazy to me because everybody has the most basic right to live. That's not a right that can be taken from you. And so Alabama's position is, and other states who have the death penalty, is that if you take away someone's right to live, then we are going to take away yours. And that's fine. That part is fine. I don't agree with the death penalty because taking a life is still taking a life. But again, there are exceptions into everything. Self-defense, self-preservation, and on principle. You did something that you should never be allowed to do, and that's take another person's life. And so because of that, the state in which you live that happens to believe in and have indoctrinated the death penalty is going to take yours. Shit is what it is. Deal with it. In a special concurrence, a justice by the name of Tom Parker called on the U.S. Supreme Court to revisit Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that created a right to abortion. Now, this article, WND exclusive, I'm going to put the link of it in the description box of this video, so that you all can take a look at it. And basically what I want to do is there's some legal jargon in here, which I'm going to spare everybody of. I'm putting a link of the article in the description box just because I think it's a very interesting article. I also think it's interesting that it came days after. I'm sure that, this has been in the works, but that the article was published days after I had the idea to talk about abortion and rights and, the rights of unborn children I think it's very interesting. And so I look for signs like this. And when I see signs like this, I have to pay attention to it because I know that it's for a reason. And I do 100% believe that during my lifetime, during the next, I don't know, 50 years, inside of the next 50 years, there is going to be an overturning of the Roe v. Wade decision. I believe that it should be overturned, but I believe that there are certain adjustments and or caveats, addendums made. But I do believe that abortion should be illegal. Not because of women's rights, but because I don't give a fuck who you are and what your rights are. You don't have the right to take another person's life. Fuck you. It just is what it is. Agree or disagree. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's my fucking position. I stand on my position no matter what. So this is just Justice Tom Parker addressing the U.S. Supreme Court. I write especially to expound upon the principles presented in the main opinion and to note the continued legal anomaly and logical fallacy that is Roe v. Wade. I'm going to pause here. This justice clearly, and there were other literature that I read that other people, both in law who practice as attorneys and who are not, but were around for that time. A lot of people feel like that Roe v. Wade decision was the wrong decision. And a lot of times what people don't realize is in the legal system, you have attorneys on both sides, and they're arguing on different points within a case based on what their interpretation of the Constitution is, of law is. And really it comes down to how well they're able to argue those points is usually what ultimately determines what decision is going to be made. And of course, how prudent that judge is. And a lot of people, I think, felt like the Roe v. Wade decision, that they got it wrong. But I'm going to continue. This person, Parker, goes on to say, I urge the United States Supreme Court to overrule this increasingly isolated exception to the rights of unborn children. Parker affirmed the Alabama court's rationale that unborn children are persons entitled to the full and equal protection of the law. Now, here's what Parker is referring to, and this is important because I made this argument, of course, probably not as eloquent as that, of course, but there was a case out of Alabama where a gentleman by the name of, let me get it right, Jesse Phillips. He was charged with the murder of his wife and his unborn child. Now, on his side, the argument was that, well, hold on. I can't be charged with the murder of my unborn child because per Alabama law, a state in which abortion is legal, a child is not a person. And that's why women have the right to kill them, essentially. And the Alabama Supreme Court did not agree with him because he was ultimately convicted and I guess appealed to the Supreme Court, and they upheld that, you killed your child. We're not, we affirm that. We're not backing down from that position. We're not going to overturn that position. It is what it is. So then seeing this case play out, this Justice Parker said, well, wait a minute. If the Alabama Supreme Court feels like unborn children are persons entitled to the full and equal protection of the law of the most basic, which is the inalienable right to live, then we need to address some shit here. So he goes on to say, the article goes on to say, Parker asserted Roe v. Wade is without historical or constitutional support, carved out an exception to the rights of unborn children, and prohibited states from recognizing an unborn child's inalienable right to life when that right conflicts with a woman's right to abortion. And there is the problem. And that's where I will stop reading. For those of you who want to see the article, it is very interesting. There are some dope ass points mentioned, and I'll take some of the points that I read which I've probably already argued and agree with, and I'll paraphrase them in my own way throughout the rest of this blog. But if you want to read the article, link in the description, go check that out. It's pretty interesting. But that last part that I just read, so for states recognizing the rights of unborn children as far as their inalienable right to life, when there's a conflict with women's rights to abortion, here is where we have this big issue. And this has been the issue since the beginning that I've been arguing. I'm all for women's rights. I'm all for the rights of any group that feels that they are not equal, any group that feels persecuted, any group that feels like they have to fight for rights that everyone else has that they don't. But I also have a little bit of beef with women, and of course it's not all women, but the women who take on this point. Any woman who takes on this point. If you feel that your right to do with your body what you choose should be yours no matter what, even when it comes to deciding on whether or not to end the life of your unborn child, I think that you are selfish. And I think that you are a stain on the history in this country of any group that has tried to fight for rights that they wanted to be afforded simply because those rights were afforded to everyone else and should have been afforded to them, and only was not because of their sexual orientation or because of the color of their skin or because of their religion or race or what have you. When Black people in this country fought for their freedom from slavery, from bondage, they didn't say we should be free and white people, the slave owners, they should all turn into our slaves. No, they simply said, you have freedom, we want our freedom. When Black people were freed, when slavery was abolished, in the interim from when slavery was legally abolished to when Black people were actually free, freedom did not look like it should have looked. There were a great disparagement of rights from now freed slaves and the rest of the population. And so for years and decades, Black people fought for their equality. First, to be recognized as more than just 3/5 of a fucking person. And then for rights to vote and to work and have equal pay and be able to go to the same schools and to go to the same restaurants and, go do your history, go do your research. But we have never said that we should have these things, and now because you took these things from us for so long, because we didn't have these things before, now you shouldn't have these things and we should. No, we only ever argued that we just want what you have. We want the same freedom. We want to be equal. We understand that equal doesn't mean different. Doesn't mean the same, because equality doesn't look the same for everyone. It just is what it is. And when the LGBTQ community fought for decades to have the same rights as everyone else in the heterosexual community, they didn't say that we should have the right to get married and your rights should be stripped for you to get married. They didn't say that the rights that heterosexuals have, we want them and then we want them to be taken from heterosexuals. No. The LGBTQ community simply said, everyone else in the world has these rights. We want those rights too. We're citizens, we're tax-paying, we're whatever. We deserve these same rights. And they were right. And even if they would still be fighting for some rights that they have managed to win those cases and be afforded, they would still be right. Them being right is not predicated on the fact that they won a case or the fact that they now have legal rights to get married. It doesn't change the fact that they would be right to want those same rights. But again, they didn't say, in us wanting these rights, we want to take some rights from you all. So I have a problem with the only group with the only right that I see conflicts with another right of another person. And that's not, to me, it's just deplorable. Women's rights is one thing. To say that you should have the right to vote, 100%. Say that you should have the right that if you work to make equal pay as a man who does the same job, 100%. But to say that you should have the right to kill your unborn child just because it's your body and you decided that you don't want a child to grow inside of your body, understand that. But that child is a life, and as a consenting adult, you chose to engage in activity that could result in pregnancy. And I think that there needs to stop being backdoors for women where there are no backdoors or recourse for men. And I argued the point, and I probably shouldn't have done it, because an already emotional person who's arguing a right to do with what you want with your body as a woman versus a man telling you that you can't kill that child because it's your body. I should have argued the law. I still probably would have met the same disagreements, but I'm glad that this article pointed out that there's an even more direct contradiction. Fuck men and women, or men versus women. The reason for this very article, and where this justice addressed the United States Supreme Court. If a person stabs a pregnant woman, causing the death of their unborn baby, even within the gestational period of which that woman could have still decided to get an abortion if she chose to do so. But if that person stabs that woman's stomach and that baby dies, that person can be charged with murder. Interesting, because if that same woman who is pregnant with that child decides to kill that child, she can't be charged with anything. Why? Because it's her child? Because it's her body? It makes no sense. Logically, it does not make any sense. That's the equivalent to me of me saying, I have 3 children and I can kill one of my children, but if one of you kills one of my children, I expect you to go to jail for the rest of your life. Or if we're in a state that, has the death penalty, then you should be executed. Now, people on the panel would say that's not the same thing. It's a different argument. Well, why is it different? Oh, well, because, an unborn child is inside of a woman's body, and a woman has the right to do with her body what she wants. And so here's where the selfishness comes in. If the law is saying that an unborn child has rights, most basic of which is the right to live, and someone outside of that mother, an external person, purposefully causes that life to end, then that unborn child will be treated exactly like any other human being with their inalienable rights to live. And so you're dealing with a murder case. Why the fuck would the law differentiate that woman from an external person just because that child is in that woman's body? If another person can be charged with murder for killing your child, you should be able to be charged with murder for killing your child purposefully. Just because it's in one, the only thing that separates those situations is, in one case, you didn't want the child to die, and in the other case, you did. So what really is the difference? Solely because it's your body as a woman? Well, no. What this justice is pointing out is that shouldn't be the exception. You should not be able to, in the life of your child, if another person can be found guilty of murder for doing the same thing. And I think this is where the big contradiction comes into play. The law is supposed to be as fair as possible. And the law is supposed to apply evenly and equally amongst the people. I don't care about anybody who would comment and who would say, but it doesn't. We know that, obviously, and that's part of the reason why I'm here. It's part of the reason why this channel exists. We know that it doesn't. We're not talking about doesn't. We're talking about the mission statement, the purpose of the law. And this is why there are often laws revisited. This is why there are often laws that have to be amended, and why in the different statutes in any locale, any state, any providence, any city that has its own, state laws and county specific or city specific guidelines and bylaws and things of that nature, ordinances, is because as different things come up, sometimes laws need to be addressed. As different things are pointed out, sometimes those things need to be revisited. And the best thing, the best and the worst thing, obviously, the baby lost their life and a woman lost her life. But the best thing that could have happened out of that double murder case was the fact that somebody had the foresight and somebody had the intellect to say, hold on, if this person who appealed to the Supreme Court is being told that they're guilty of murder, even though the unborn child they murder was an unborn child, then why the fuck can abortion be legal? There's a contradiction here. It's a direct conflict. So this is what it boils down to, is it women's rights or is it right to life? Should one person's right supersede another person's right? This is a slippery slope, but my argument has to be that, yes, when it comes to the right to life, which is the most basic human right there is, period. When it comes to the right to life, that right should trump every other person's other rights. Just because you want the right to do with your body what you want, when that conflicts with my right to live as an unborn child, fuck you and your rights to do with what you want with your body. Look, the Roe v. Wade decision was made in 1973, 10 years before I was born. If, for some reason, it was decided that I was going to be aborted, of course I wouldn't be here today. But there's a bigger issue here. That bigger issue is for all of the people who have been tried for murder, for all the people who have been convicted of murder, and for all of the victims of murder, and for all of the women who have had their babies taken away from them, and for all of the women who, didn't want that to be the case. It's just that someone murdered their child. I find it very hard to look at the individuals who committed those acts in any way, shape, or form a different light than the women, droves of women who walk into abortion clinics every day in this country and around the world and terminate their pregnancies. I don't care what anybody else thinks. That's my position. If you take the life of your child for any reason other than that child is the product of a rape, or there are medical conditions where your doctors are recommending that you do that because of potential medical danger to you, the mother, outside of those two cases, those two situations, if you take the life of your unborn child, I look at you as a murderer, because that is what you are. You are taking the life of a child. You are deciding for another human being who nobody should have the right to decide whether or not that human being gets to experience life, whatever that life may look like. And one of the cop-outs, I think, that the panel argued was that, oh, what if that child is not going to be brought into a situation that is stable, or a situation where they have two parents? Not my problem. Not my decision to make. The universe, God, whatever your religion is, whatever your deity or higher power is, did not promise that in life. We were never promised that life would be easy. We were never promised how long we would be here. We were promised life. For those of us who were given life, that's the promise. And the mandate to that is to do with it what we see fit, in line with us being good people and being righteous and being, God-fearing, God-loving creatures for those of us who believe in such a thing. And it is what it is. All due respect to the panel and all due respect to anybody who argues for women's rights, but fuck women's rights as it pertains to abortion, period. Because as a father myself, any woman who would ever abort my unborn child loses a certain respect for me that you can never get back. And any woman who would want to do that to my unborn child, in my opinion, isn't worthy of ever being a mother, ever, at any point in life. It's just how I see it. And as an individual, if this law gets overturned, if the right to abortion goes away, and there will be cases. And if a case happens down the line where a woman is on trial because she had an abortion anyway, even though it's illegal, if this all comes to pass, like I think it will, then I think that she should be found guilty. I think that she should be looked at the same way as any other person who murders any other person. And I don't think there should be any differences or exceptions made. And I just don't, because I really don't see it the way that other people see it. It's not about, I can't reiterate this enough times. And I'm sorry, when it comes to voting, when it comes to equal pay, when it comes to any other aspect of the Me Too movement, women, I heard you. I feel you and I agree with you. But when it comes to your right to murder an unborn child, to take away their right to be able to have life the same way that you had life, then fuck your rights. It's just how I feel about it. It is what it is. I'm not going to make this one too long. Again, remember that I am putting the link to this article, this address to the U.S. Supreme Court, in the description box of this live stream, of this blog. And also, stay tuned for tomorrow night, Tuesday, and every Tuesday, roundtable discussion around 7 p.m. Different topics every week, different things to go over with the panel. And then keep in mind that shortly after that, live stream every Tuesday night, probably in the late hours of Tuesday night or early hours of Wednesday morning, there's going to be a follow-up blog similar to this one called Roundtable Epilogues, Afterthoughts, so to speak, where anything that I didn't get a chance to address, I'm going to address at that time. Anything that I didn't get a chance to rebuttal or an opinion that I didn't get to voice, I'm going to take that opportunity to do it. All right. If you follow my content, if you watch my blogs, if you listen to my podcast, if you follow me on social media, anything that encompasses my content, if you follow that content and you believe that I talk a lot of shit, you're 100% correct. I talk a lot of shit because I'm passionate about the shit that I talk about. And if you follow my content and you believe I'm overly opinionated, well, you're 100% correct again. We all have opinions. The difference is I try to use my opinions to affect positive change. At the end of the day, I'm just a realist who sees shit for what it is and who tries to approach every situation in a commonsensical way. And that is because my logic is undeniable. And that logic is that, there are a few things that separate us: oceans, borders, and culture. Outside of those few things, we're all just a part of one human race, trying to find the best way to carve out a life for ourselves and the people we care about. I say it all the time. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. Let me know what y'all think about this one, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.